Hey guys, welcome to Cup of Jen, episode 12. Today I'm kind of chilling with a Starbucks mug. I have tea in it, and it's got these red lipstick marks and an XOXO, which is, I feel like, a little bit fitting just because today I wore red lipstick and everybody at my work freaked out. So it just feels like it's a red lipstick kind of day. Anyway, welcome here. I'm so glad that you guys are joining me for the 12th episode of Cup of Jen. This is really exciting because I really didn't know how this podcast was going to go, and so I'm just really grateful to you guys for listening and for staying interested. I've said this before, but if you are interested in advertising on Cup of Jen, please let me know. We do have an email now, cupofjenpodcast@gmail.com. So if you want to email that, then we can maybe hook you up with an advertisement. And yeah, because your girl needs to make some money, not gonna lie. Anyway, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. As you guys know, a huge part of my heart for this podcast is to kind of journey with other dreamers or other creatives and other people who have kind of ambition but maybe have trouble breaking through right now, or it's just not your time, or you're in a season of waiting, or you're in a season where you have to take a step back or whatever. And I just want to be with you guys and let you know that that's okay, and that it's a journey, and that things take time. So it's funny that that's kind of how it all started. And last night I went down for a nap at 7 p.m. And maybe that was my first mistake right there, but I was just kind of tired. I'd been really going at it all day. And I thought, hey, 7 p.m. I'll take like a 45-minute nap, just kind of refresh myself before I head to the studio and before I do some rehearsing and before I get stuff done. And I don't know how this happened, but I looked over at my phone and I see 7 a.m. So I went to bed at 7 p.m. for a nap, and I woke up this morning literally on the dot at 7 a.m. No alarm, nothing. And I was like, I slept 12 hours. For real, just like right through, no problem, slept for 12 hours. So I kind of think that's an interesting little segue into today and into the podcast, that I clearly needed rest. And that's what I want to talk about today, is rest and what that looks like as somebody who's a dreamer, as somebody who's a creative, as somebody who has goals and things they want to accomplish, but recognizing that we still need to take time to rest and recuperate. So you'll have to journey with me here. I have some quotes and different things to share with you that I found. But first, I just want to go through and talk a little bit about rest, the definition, what it even means. So if you go through on Merriam-Webster and you just see the dictionary definition, it says rest as a noun, first of 6 different definitions, is literally repose or sleep. So that's an obvious one, is that we need sleep. I'm not always good at that one. Oftentimes I stay up really late, and my schedule, I tend to be a night owl, and especially as a creative, that tends to happen to me a lot. But sleep is obviously the number one way to relax. It says specifically a bodily state characterized by minimal functional and metabolic activities. Other definitions include freedom from activity or labor, a state of motionless or inactivity, a place for resting or lodging, peace of mind or spirit, rhythmic silence in music, a brief pause in reading, something used for support. And then what's funny is that's all things that are nouns, but then they also have rest as a verb, an action. So it says to rest by lying down, to cease from action or motion, refrain from labor or exertion, to be free from anxiety or disturbance, to sit and lie fixed or supported, to remain confident, to be based or founded in something, to rest in something. So those are all of the kind of, I guess, what would you say, the many definitions. But what I found fascinating is when I just looked up on Google what rest was, it says rest. To rest means to relax into something and let it support you. To relax into something and let it support you. So our best definition of this is obviously going to be when we get into bed at night and we just let go of all of our bodily tension and we just close our eyes and we let the bed support us so that our brain can kind of turn off. Well, actually, funny enough, it doesn't turn off, but that it can not focus on having to hold the body up. You can just sort of go into a minimal state. But what I find so fascinating is that you could take that definition and make it mean something not so literal. To rest or lean into something, to relax into something and let it support you. I think there's a lot of layers to that and how that can be beneficial as an artist. So I just wanted to sort of talk about a couple of things. Like when you're creative, I find that most of us are expending a lot of energy just trying to get our careers to take off. So if you're someone who is dreaming of starting a company and maybe it's not even artistic, but it's just something you want to do and you're putting all of your energy into that, that can be exhausting quite quickly, especially if you don't have, other people supporting you and other people taking a bit of that load with you. One thing that I have found is that there is physical rest and then there is mental and emotional rest. And when people would tell me to rest over the years, I always thought of it from the perspective of resting physically. So I never really took into consideration where my mental state was at. I thought to myself, if I am lying down somewhere, that means that I am resting. If I am sunken into a couch or I take a coffee break for 15 minutes, that is me resting. And that's not necessarily untrue, but it's not the full picture. And so that's something that I think is really interesting, is that rest can come in many different ways and it manifests differently for different people. So clearly the first and probably quicker of the two to talk about is physical rest. So when you're working, your body and your muscles, like they need to have a break. And actually a perfect metaphor for this is going to the gym. When you go to the gym, you take weights and you weight lift, or you whatever you might do at the gym. This is what I did at the gym. But you want to build muscle. And so what happens is you are breaking down that muscle. It actually sort of breaks apart. And as you kind of push through the pain, you push past a certain level that feels natural and normal to go past. And then you give your arm, say, if you're doing upper body, and you give your arm a break. And you don't do that same exercise for a couple of days or a day at least, because you need to give your muscles time to reconnect, rebuild, and then and grow. And so what often happens is people who are new to going to the gym, they get really excited and really intense about it, and so they end up working the same muscle day after day. And what they don't understand is that muscle is not actually growing because you've not given it time to grow. So you've not given it a break to build into a stronger, bigger muscle, so then they don't see results, and it's because they're working the same thing. And actually, most personal trainers, I think, will schedule you so that you have different parts of your body that you're working on different days, and that actually balances out. So you can still get exercise every day, but you just don't work the exact same muscles all the time, because rest is actually as important for bodybuilding as the lifting of weights. So that was something that I found really interesting, and I think that applies now with rest as well in life. Like, if you just continue, even if you're very passionate, to push yourself when it might actually not be the time to do that, you've done it day and day and day and day and day after day, you don't actually give yourself that time and that room to grow. And I think as a creative especially, it's important, because we spend so much time thinking up ideas and exerting energy, and if we don't give ourselves that patience and that time, we stress ourselves out thinking about one idea, and we get obsessed with it, and it no longer is natural or fun for us, and we just kind of end up, it's almost like we squeeze something to work out as opposed to letting it flow through us. And I think that can be a very frustrating, complex time for the artist, because we just end up stuck, and then we start to second guess ourselves, and that's just not a great place. So physical rest is really important for creatives. So another way to describe it is, it's even written into scripts. So when I take a scene, often in theater, but also in film, you'll get things that are called beats or pause. And what that is there for is to give breathing room to the script and to make it more natural. So oftentimes, I think when you're a fresh actor, you see this beat and you think that means that you just have to stop, but it's like you don't fill the beat with meaning. And either that, or you do the opposite, which is you kind of ignore the beat at all and you just rush through it as if it's not there. But the writer actually intended for rest to be in the musicality, in the script itself, the rhythm and the flow. We don't continuously stop, we don't continue to talk and never stop talking, and it just goes on and on and on, and already you're worried about me because I'm not breathing, and this is the way that it's that's just not natural, right? It's not natural. In natural conversation, you have rest. And so it's weird how it's built into so many facets of our life, even physical rest, where if I do not breathe, right? If I don't take that breath, if I just rush past it, I miss so many moments. And furthermore, I just straight up die. If I stop breathing, you can't function. Your body physically, it doesn't take long to not work, because your body needs breath, your body needs air, your body needs rest. And it's a relationship with all those things. So by virtue of being human, we're actually forced to rest physically. And I believe mentally as well, but physically is the first part. So for me, physical rest has been a problem for me. I do have a bit of an issue sometimes scheduling that in. And it doesn't always just mean sleep. I think sometimes it is just to, sit down, or, I've worked a lot of jobs where I'm on my feet all day. And luckily now, as a receptionist, that's not as much the case. But oftentimes you have these jobs where you don't stop. And so I think it is important to give, quite literally, our muscles and our body time to recuperate before just going out and doing it all again. Now, emotional rest or mental rest, that's a little bit different. So for me, what does that mean? When I was thinking about this subject last year, I really thought that mental rest was just sort of emptying the mind and sort of releasing yourself of any kind of thought. And that didn't really work for me very well. And it's not for a lack of trying. I felt like it didn't necessarily happen. Like I would relax and take out all the tension in my body and hang my neck and whatever to just kind of breathe in and out and just focus or just try to, empty my brain. But what I realized is that that's not possible because our brains just kind of run at their own speed and you can't stop yourself from having thoughts necessarily. You can only kind of control where they go. So, now this year I have a different opinion on things, and the reason primarily is because of a trip that I took last April to Israel, and I went to something called a Jewish kibbutz. So this is really fascinating for me. I went to this area, and not every kibbutz first of all, let me describe what a kibbutz is. A kibbutz is a piece of land in Israel, maybe outside of Israel too, but it's a Jewish settlement where people, they come together like families, and they live off the land, and they kind of make use of an area. I guess it's like a settlement's kind of the best way to say it, but it could be described as something else. Anyway, in this particular instance, we visited all over Israel, and we were in a particular kibbutz, and not every kibbutz is a religious kibbutz, but this one was. And so we stayed there, which was awesome, for one night. And one of the cool things is one of the rabbis came to sort of chat with us and answer any questions. And part of what was so interesting about this particular kibbutz is that each of them lived off of the land and donated all of their time and all of their money to each other. So what that meant was no one had more money than other people. You would each have your job, and some people's job they would have had to get a lot more training for, and other people's jobs not as much. There were doctors there were teachers there were kitchen workers there, and no matter what you do in your job, you all share all of the money. So it's kind of like, I'm hesitant to say this, but it's kind of like what communism might have looked like if it worked out, where all of them together, they shared everything that they had, and they kind of functioned as a group, as one, and nobody had pride or disrespect for other people. I don't know that that would work for every scenario, but this particular kibbutz was good at that, and that was how they chose to live, and they chose to spend their time with one another. And anyway, so I was visiting there, and the rabbi came to chat with us, and he talked about the Jewish religion, and also just about the culture of what we would call in Christianity Sabbath, but what they refer to as Shabbat. And essentially what it is it's from sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday. They don't work, they rest. And this is very serious. They do not do any work on Shabbat. And that goes from everything to from certain floors of an elevator. It's like they don't want to push the buttons. Like things as simple as that to they don't cook for themselves. They don't work. And I asked the rabbi, I said, so this might sound like a naive question. Are you able to tell me more about what you do on a Sabbath? Like, how do you rest? Is it just that you refrain from pushing buttons? Is it just that you don't cook? Like, how does that work? And he said, given that they're an agricultural center, his words to me were, living in the time we live, they kind of were cheating because they had machinery and all of these things to continue to work the fields, continue to work the farms, so that even when they were not doing the thing on themselves, working and operating those machines, they could still let them run all computerized on Shabbat anyway. So in that respect, they already had kind of that going for them, which is awesome. But he said in terms of what their Sabbath looks like, he said they wake up the same time every day. So on Monday through Friday, they wake up at like 7 a.m. or I think maybe earlier than that. And on Shabbat, it doesn't change. They wake up just as early on their Sabbath day, which for me, I was like, oh, because to me, Sabbath means like, you sleep in and you get to kind of relax because it's your day off. And that's what rest looked like to me, was just this physical rest. And he said, no, we wake up at the same time because we're not overtired. Because throughout our week, we have scheduled things in an even kind of capacity so that by the time we come to this day, it's just an exciting time. We don't have to feel stressed or whatever about getting extra sleep because we have to make up for the week. He said instead what we do is rather than emptying the mind, they fill it. So they wake up at the same time, but instead of going to work, they go to the synagogue. Instead of working the fields, they work the scriptures. So it's for them a matter of filling themselves up on Sabbath. And what will happen is they'll go and they'll, study scripture, study passages from the Old Testament, kind of dialogue with one another about what they think the interpretations of things are. And then after that, like, they will spend time with their family and their friends. So they won't work, but they'll just get together and they'll have a meal. They'll share a meal and they'll talk about how things are. In the case of this particular kibbutz, they invited friends from off the kibbutz to come visit and hang out with them and just enjoy each other's company. And then, of course, after sundown on Saturday, they're able to kind of go back and do whatever work they want to do, if they want to continue to do anything. And they're free to get up and do the dishes or whatever. But I thought that was so fascinating because my entire life I had thought that rest meant the absence of the absence of something. But instead, for them, their idea of rest is to fill themselves up. And then I started to kind of consider how like meditation works and the idea of focusing on something and allowing that to kind of guide your thinking. And I know that oftentimes meditation is a practice that is used in like a Buddhist setting, but actually meditation comes from the Bible as well. And you have a lot of people just praying and meditating and thinking about scripture like these Jewish men at this at this kibbutz were doing on Shabbat. So I thought that was a fascinating story, and it totally changed the culture I had around rest, particularly with mental rest. So I just wanted to share with you guys that story and think about going forward as a creative. Oftentimes, like, it's tricky because our art isn't just in things that we've created, like a design or a play or something we wrote. It's often the stories and the thoughts that we're navigating in our head as well. So to shut that down, from being someone who gets a song lyric that comes to their mind or wants to sort through a mechanical problem, or somebody who has a social media idea, like having all that bouncing around in your brain as an artist, nothing is wrong with that. It's all very positive. But allowing yourself to kind of take a break from that is really important because it allows fruitfulness in the work and also growth in ourselves. So how do we do that? Well, I have kind of just come to the realization that the main two ways that are suggested in all these articles you'll find online are, one, to meditate. So as I was saying, filling your mind up. For me, what meditation looks like is to sit back and kind of like untense my body and just think about scriptures. So sometimes I'll do a guided prayer or like that I found online, or sometimes I have the Bible app on my phone and I let it just get read to me, because that's technology now. You can have somebody read it to you, which is amazing. Sometimes I'll just read one verse even and just think about it, let my mind kind of focus on it and then wander. And I feel like that has been really helpful, because that allows my mental, my brain to be distracted with that and to think about that. And simultaneously, what I find fascinating is, because we are so connected, my body actually gets less and less tense at the same time. But I think that's really important. And like, of course, a key component is to be breathing. Because so, as I talk about breathing, I can't breathe. But breath is so important, especially as an actor. But I feel like as a singer and as an actor, it's key. But as a dancer, it's key. You know, so anything that's like a performance art, you have to be able to breathe, and you have to be able to breathe deeply. And it's amazing how often we try to escape deep breath, because that's where we hold all of our emotion, all of our thoughts, all of our triggers is in that deep breath. But we have to go there so that we can release it and let it go, as opposed to holding on to something that might be not for us, or toxic, or maybe it's good, but you need to express it in order to feel fully free. So those are all huge components. Something I kind of came to realize is that you don't always need to have an answer or fix things, but often just breathing through things is enough. And that was hard for me because I love to have answers and I love to have control. And we're going to talk about this on another podcast at some point, but at some level you have to surrender and let go of that and realize that we're really not in control. And it's not something that we have to feel negative about. It's something that we can actually become friends with. But for me, it all starts with that breath and deep breathing. Now, this is something from a blog called Music Bed. They commented that Stefan Sagmeister, who did a TED Talk in 2009, and he talked about how rest is important for the creative. And how he does that with his design team in New York. He takes a sabbatical every 7 years, and he has seen the creativity sort of skyrocket through that rest year, but also financially, he's gained a lot more finances, even though his studio is closed for a full year and his team doesn't work officially. It's pretty crazy, so you should check that out. But they kind of refer to this one part of his TED Talk where he shares about it. But Stefan Sagmeister describes a project he orchestrated in which hundreds of volunteers wrote, in coins, "Obsessions make my life worse and my work better. Life and creativity are a zero-sum game. Devotion to one destroys the other, but there also comes a point when obsession with art begins to destroy the art itself. It manifests as stagnation, or worse, burnout." So their argument is that creative rest can be the most creative thing you can do. And that by doing that and stepping away, you actually give yourself room, not just to think and come up with ideas, but to fall in love with your art again. And I believe that that has been a challenge of mine recently, that I have become so obsessed with getting an agent or having the right opportunities or making myself known in certain rooms or whatever that could have been, that I not so much now, but for a while was really obsessed with that. And already over like the last little bit, I would say since the summer, I've really kind of come down from that slowly but surely. And it's been tough because even as my last podcast said, I really do go through ups and downs of it where I feel like I'm being teased, or I feel like maybe God has this certain plan for me, and then I feel like I step out in faith, and when it doesn't necessarily work, I get confused and feel like, oh, then God must be like mad at me, or like then I did the wrong thing, or whatever that might be. And it's all just these kind of like false things that really just make your life harder and create conflict between yourself and your art, and it just is so unnecessary and builds this kind of wall to the point where I have felt for a long time like the arts are my calling. Like I would have to be doing them even if I didn't get paid. But there's a certain level of which when you don't get paid for something for a long time, you start to feel like, okay, I need to step back and do the thing about it that makes me love it, that makes me excited to do it, rather than what I think will work, rather than what I think other people want, rather than any of that stuff. It just has to become about you and what you're doing. And that has to be enough and exciting. So it is interesting. When I started this podcast, I said, sort of as a joke, it's like, well, for the 2 people who will listen to this. But to be honest with you, I thought about this the other day. I'm like, if only 2 people listened to my podcast, would I continue to do it? And the truth of it is, I'm not sure. Because I did definitely start, thinking, well, what do people want to hear? Like, what would really encourage others? And I am very motivated by inspiring and helping other people. I don't necessarily think I'm this big inspiration, but I just mean insofar as we can help each other out, and we can be there for one another and continue to help kind of grow each other. Because that has been really huge for me, is having other friends and people that I see like trying to make that effort to talk about what they're doing that's working for them. Because so often this business of the arts can feel so lonely, and I don't want anybody to feel like they have this gift but they can't use it because of extenuating circumstances, or because they're not good enough, or any of that stuff. It's like, if you have a gift, I just want you to be able to use it the way that I want to be able to use mine. So one of the ways that I think we can do that is by resting. Now, the first thing, physical rest. The second thing, mental rest. But in a sub part of that mental rest, I think that we can split that up into 2, because we can say meditate is one, but the other one I came up with is mediate. And that's going to sound a bit weird, but essentially what I mean by that is mediating between your left and your right brain. So often what I have found online that they say, and this kind of came up a lot in my Creative Blocks podcast, but often what I see is that what we need to do when we're really stuck, when we really need rest, and it's counterintuitive because you just want to get in bed, but is go for a walk. You just need to go for a walk. You need to get outside, you need to get fresh air, you need to get breath in your lungs, and you just need to walk. And for someone like me who lives in Vancouver, Canada, otherwise known as Raincouver, sometimes that feels like a daunting situation where I don't want to go outside because I don't want to be in the wet, cold rain. But even that is more helpful than we realize and more restful than we realize. And sometimes being outside in the wet, cold rain is actually what's best for us compared to getting in bed. Sometimes you do need to get some sleep though. But I think when it comes to mental rest, sleeping can change everything, but you don't always have the time. You're not always, unfortunately, like scheduled up in such a way that you can have the luxury to sleep in or whatever. So making the most of our time being awake. Obviously, if you can take a nap or whatever, that's great too. But that's one thing that really helps, because And I've mentioned this before, like when I was creatively blocked, I'd go for a walk and put in headphones. Now my brain, my left brain as it were, is satisfied because logically speaking, we are going for a walk and my brain has the music to kind of listen to and keep track of, and it's kind of looking out for things. And my right brain can just wander. Oh, that's interesting. I never thought of that way before. Oh, I am loving the smell of that tree. I just love the energy of it. My brain can just be in 30 different places and it's free to kind of roam because my body is physically moving. And so I've split my kind of components of my brain up to distract itself. So I call it mediating between the two, because sometimes my sometimes my right brain and my left brain are at war, and the logic just wants to overtake the creative. And I have a very strong left brain, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a very positive thing. But sometimes I have to stand up for the right brain, which is the creative side, and allow it to not get beat up by the left brain. Anyone else relate? Okay. So, going for a walk, getting outside, getting some fresh air, huge. So that's an option. Obviously, some other suggestions from online that I found were find a side hobby, something that is just fun for you. You're not going to make money at it. It's not another potential business opportunity. It's just something you're like, oh, this is cool. They gave the example of Taylor Swift, which I think is awesome. They said Taylor Swift likes to make like Christmas snow globes in her spare time. I don't know if she does that all the time. I'm a Swiftie, so I would know. But I definitely know that she did that like during her Red era, but I don't know if she continues to do that all the time. But regardless, they found out that she did this and they gave that as an example. And I think it's really cool because it's true that, you know, Taylor Swift, even a really famous person who is totally like in her creative element all the time, making these records, writing these songs, producing music, acting. She does multiple spheres, and even she's like, but also snow globes, you know? And I think that's cool because it's a way for your brain to kind of rest and relax outside of those spheres. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope that you gleaned something from this episode, that you heard a story, or that you were inspired to just treat your body right and rest. It is not something that comes easy. I think it definitely starts with building habits and patterns. That's the case for me. But just allowing yourself, if you're a control freak, allowing yourself to control your mind in a positive way. So if you like to control your mind by setting boundaries on it and saying, not now. Today, you don't have to go into a spiral. You can just say, okay, I'm actually going to focus on rest. And I don't have to empty my mind and work super hard to like let it stay empty, but you can fill it with something positive. Fill it with, my recommendation obviously is the Bible and scripture, but you know, fill it with encouraging music, fill it with motivational speakers that encourage you, fill it with, just instrumental music that gets your brain going. Fill it with ocean sounds. I don't know. Whatever you need to do to kind of let your body get rid of its tension and unclench and relax is a very positive thing. And then ultimately, sleep is not for the weak. Sleep is for the strong. And I loved to say sleep is for the weak as a joke, because we all know that the strong people sleep, and it's okay to give yourself permission to relax. And in fact, you need to, you must do it. It's not an if, it's a you will and when. For example, even if you don't give yourself a choice, sometimes it still happens. Went to bed at 7 p.m., woke up at 7 a.m. It happens to us, okay? I hope you guys find rest in this next season. And I'm praying for you all, and I hope that you guys are touched by this. And coming up to Christmas, I hope you guys find rest with your families, with your friends, with whoever you are celebrating with. Merry Christmas from Cup of Jen, from me. And we'll see you for, I guess, yeah, we'll see you for episode 13 next week. Okay, bye.